Welcome to the Running with James podcast. We are committed to helping runners, OCR athletes, and the everyday person get involved, get connected, and get committed to becoming the best versions of themselves. Remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. Now here's your host, James Wyatt.
This week's episode of the Running with James podcast is brought to you by BC Fitness, Houston's premier destination for run coaching, high rocks training, OCR prep, and everything functional fitness. Whether you're chasing a marathon PR, tackling your first high rocks, or just looking to level up your fitness game, we've got you covered. We're also the proud home of Houston's High Rocks Run Club, and this Saturday, January 18th, we're hosting a special shakeout run at Memorial Park for the Houston Full and Half Marathon. Join us at 7 a.m. to loosen up, meet the community, and get ready for race day. Learn more about BC Fitness and everything we have to offer at mybcfit.com. BC Fitness, where champions are built. Now let's get into this week's episode, live and in color. Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Running with James. We are in season 4 and we are excited to be joining you. The weekend is almost here and it is Houston Marathon and Half Marathon time.
I thought you were going to rhyme it for a second. Like season more, we're here to give you more.
Would you like to try again?
No, I think we should just keep
I failed you so miserably.
No, it's okay. I just thought you could read my mind, but whatever.
I apologize that I have yet. I can't read my wife's mind. What in the world makes you think I can read your mind?
I feel like I'm a pretty open book.
No, just because I know what you're going to do doesn't mean I know what you're thinking all the time.
You don't always know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I do. You are an open book when it comes to that stuff. You want to know why? Because we're all creatures of habit.
Yeah.
We're all creatures of habit.
You just know I'm going to be late all the time.
And I know kind of like your habits and I know your tendencies. So it's not that I know, it's I give an educated guess of what's going to happen, and I tend to be right. Right? So it's not a magic trick, right? It's just
paying attention to habits.
Yes, that's all. That's just I pay attention.
So attentive.
Yeah.
So nice.
So, speaking of being attentive, and I don't really think I just have to get this off my chest.
Boy.
And I know you heard this the other day.
I did.
Huh?
I don't know. Did I?
Oh, you said I did?
I
that
did.
Was a question. That was a
I did.
So the other day, I had a group of children that I was doing a class with, and I was having them go through all these different movements, right? So we're working on like body awareness, we're working our way up through like obstacle course kind of training, building like functional fitness.
Sure.
So usually we do some sort of sport.
Yep.
So now I'm working kind of on some of the foundations in the beginning of this kind of school year, or the second semester of the school year, right? So I had them doing bear crawls.
Okay.
Had them doing some camel crawls.
Okay.
Had them doing some crab crawls.
Okay.
Right. And we were standing in line. I was telling them about because a lot of them were just kind of going through the motions.
Sure.
They were rushing. They were racing. A lot of racing.
Surprise.
Like, guys, it does not matter if you're first if you're not doing it right.
All they're hearing is wah, wah, wah,
Exactly.
wah, wah,
I was like, on the bear crawl, keep your backsides down. Opposite leg, you're trying to engage your core. On the crab crawls, guys, keep your backsides up. It's going to be challenging. Your wrists may bother you a little bit. It's part of the deal because you're learning to do something completely new. And one girl she wasn't asking a question. She just was making a statement. Those camel toe crawls are hard.
Camel toe crawl.
And I was like, what did you say? Because I didn't hear it properly. And she said, yeah, the camel toes are hard. And I was
camel
like,
toes.
No.
It got better.
No.
It just got better.
I was like, no. I was like, they're called camel crawls. Just camel crawls.
I mean, she doesn't know what she's saying.
She didn't know what she was saying.
But it's so funny.
But she heard that somewhere. And that just brought in her mind.
Camel toe.
Yeah, so someone said that to her, or she heard someone else say it.
She heard it mentioned somewhere.
And so she was just putting 2 and 2 together.
That's so funny.
And I don't know if any of the other kids jumped on it or knew or whatever, but I was like, no, camel crawl.
That's so funny.
Camel crawl. But it was everything I could inside of me. I think I did laugh, actually.
I would have.
I think
that'd have been really hard not to.
I was just like, you didn't hear him?
No.
You didn't hear it?
No, I've gotten to where half the time I'm paying attention, half the time I'm kind of zoned out because I'm like, I can't with these kids are crazy.
Well, it was
Because I'm not actually teaching that group of kids with you. I'm just kind of like in the background, and I just like get to hear all the commentary.
Yeah.
So like again, half the time I'm listening, half the time I'm like, this is a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
I just gotta put my headphones on.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny,
you
though.
always have your headphones on.
But they're not always on though. But they are on
I
often.
mean, I feel
you
like
do yell at me.
I don't yell at you.
Well, no,
actually.
sorry. You yell to get my attention because I can't hear you half the time.
Like
But
the other day, I was in the class or something like that, and I think somebody was at the door.
Yes.
And I was like, "Hey, Lauren. Hey, Lauren. Lauren." I said your name 5 times, and you just doing whatever you were doing with the microwave. So finally, I was like,
Oh,
"Lauren."
yeah.
And you were like, "Why are you yelling at me?" I'm like, "Dude, I've been calling your name for like the last 2 minutes."
I didn't even have my headphones on at that time.
And that's what you said.
No, I was literally saying at the microwave, and I couldn't hear because that microwave is loud.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you were sitting at your desk next to me,
Speakers behind me.
and and the speaker wasn't on.
Like, I had my headphones in probably.
And I said, "Hey, Lauren. Hey, Lauren. 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 What? Why are you yelling at me?"
I just wanted to make sure it's important.
If I say your name, it's because I need you to do something, or I need you to ask you a question. I shouldn't have to repeat myself. You know what you're doing. And I mentioned this to you the other day. You are guilty of doing what you do to your parents.
You did mention this to me. I am.
How many times do you have to repeat yourself with your parents?
No, my parents just can't hear.
So
Theirs is actually not their fault.
I'm worried that you can't hear.
I can't hear. I don't. If I have headphones on, I can't hear you.
Why do you have headphones on?
So I do a lot of editing and stuff on my phone, and so if I'm editing stuff on my phone, I don't want to have the sound out all the time. So if it's in my ears, and that way no one else has to hear the editing that's happening.
I don't know.
So it's just easier, and the headphones are not on probably 50% of the time.
I'm 100% sure they're the shocks that don't actually go in your ears.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can hear the ambient noise that's going around,
Yeah, I put
because
them
they're
on-
supposed to be safer, like when
I
you're running
put
on the
them
street.
really loud.
So what's the point of that?
Partially to drown out the headphones behind the speaker behind me, but also
The speaker is only on like a very short period of time.
yeah, during that time it's really just it's loud. I don't have a good answer.
Okay, that's
For
good.
you.
Hey, I'm gonna call that progress.
There we go. I don't have a good answer
I'm gonna
for
call
you.
that progress, right? So yes, guys, it is half marathon weekend, and we all know this, right? The marathon's probably one of the hardest events you're gonna do. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, unless you've got like some crazy ultra happening in like the spring, it's probably going to be one of your hardest efforts this year.
Yeah. Most of the population is not even going to attempt it.
No.
Right? Usually the half marathon sells out before the marathon, but both are very hard.
Yeah.
Right. Both are very challenging,
Very.
and both take a lot of work to get ready for.
Very
Right.
much.
So it's not just a test of your body, but it's also a test of
Your mentality.
your mind, right? So you've got to be able to stay strong. You're going to have moments where it's like a roller coaster, right? Emotionally, mentally.
I mean, 4 hours is a long time to
Well, I mean-
4.5
Yeah. I mean,
for the average bear. That's a long time to be out there running.
whether you're running the half or the full, anywhere from an hour,
It's a long time.
hour and a half to, 4 to 5 hours, that is a long time to be doing anything
And your
consistently.
body and your mind are going to be saying a lot of things to you.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to be wondering, right?
Why?
You're going to be wondering about a lot of different things, and one of the questions probably will be why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why did I do this? Why do I do this to myself? What's the reason, right?
Even if it's your fifth one, you're like, why do I still do this myself?
Yeah, you're still going to do it. So, you're definitely going to have those mental struggles. So today we're going to talk about how do we overcome? What's the mindset? How do we work our way through all the different thoughts and struggles and challenges of the event, the day of the event, so that we can be as successful as we possibly can? And how do we overcome those things?
Yeah.
Right. So for you, Lauren, what are some races maybe that you've had some of the toughest times, mentally and emotionally?
High Rocks Dallas, this past race, which was the pro division,
Okay.
tried to destroy me mentally and physically.
Okay.
That was probably the hardest one to date. Other than that, it was probably my first marathon. That was a really hard one mentally
Okay.
because it's a long time. It's not like OCR where I'm breaking it up with obstacles, or even High Rocks where you're kind of breaking it up with other things and there's a lot happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's a relatively, depending on the course you're on, it's a relatively personal journey where you're probably running pretty lonely at some times, and you're just doing it for, in my case, it was 4.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just This is long.
This is the song that doesn't end.
It really is. These miles never stop. I've passed, if you're doing the Woodlands Marathon, you've passed the finish line 3 times and you're angry about it.
Yep.
So all the things. But yeah, I'd say those are 2 of the ones that stick out immediately.
Yeah. Well, I think like as you're going through the race, right, you kind of have this, like I said, it's a roller coaster ride.
It is.
Right. And
it
so,
really is.
you know, I think you kind of have some different camps, but like in the beginning, there's like this hope, this anticipation,
The excitement of what's coming.
of it, right? And so you're like ready to get this started. And so I think you have this moment of like, okay, and I think most people are like this. They're like, okay, the possibilities are endless, right? This is my time to qualify for the Boston Marathon, or I'm going to get this PR that I've been working for, right? I'm finally going to break 4. I'm finally going to break 2, right? And so you have this hope and this anticipation, right? And so I think that same hope and anticipation, the confidence that goes into these events has a lot to do with your training.
Sure.
Right? So the better you trained, the more confident you know, the harder the workouts and the longer efforts you've done, right? The volume that you put in can really help play into that confidence so that you're more...
The less things surprise you.
Yeah, the fewer surprises you're going to have, right? So I think a lot of times that's where a lot of the self-doubt comes from in the beginning of those events, is when you haven't maybe been as consistent or put in the amount of volume or work that you maybe feel like you should have, or you know you needed to.
Yeah, I was going to say... And when you do, like, when you put in the full training for any event, doesn't matter what it is, you've probably, if you've trained consistently and often, you have probably encountered all sorts of scenarios that you've had to troubleshoot mentally, physically, all around weather-wise. And so if you're not training consistently, if you're not putting in the full effort and you get to a race day and one of those scenarios comes up, you have to troubleshoot on the spot. And in a race environment, that can be really stressful.
Right. And, I mean, honestly, I think you said it. For the most part, there shouldn't be any. We always say there's nothing new on race day.
Nothing new on race day.
So that's even how you might feel, right? So for the most part, I would think that if you've done a good job of training, you're going to go through some of those same mental like challenges and hurdles throughout your training, right? When you're doing your speed work, you're going to have those moments where, like, as you approach that, you're like, man, I don't want to do this today. Oh, this is going to suck. This is going to be so hard. And then somewhere in it, you're going to be like, maybe I just do half of it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe today's just not my day.
Yep.
Right. You're those moments where you're kind of basically arguing with yourself, and you're thinking of, how can I give myself an out? How can I give myself an excuse? And I feel like in those events or in those training sessions, if you can, you know, work through those moments, right, you build a lot of confidence, and you build like almost like a callus to an extent where, you know what, even though these thoughts come, I overcame those thoughts and I was able to push through, and you can like kind of come back to those when you're in your race.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
So, so I think in the beginning, yes, there's all this hope, there's all this excitement, this is anticipation, but I think you have to kind of almost reel that in a little bit, so that you don't overwhelm your body when you first start. And what I mean by that is you don't go out hot.
Yes.
You don't go out too fast. You don't go out on hopes and dreams rather than reality.
Yes.
Right. And so, you know, having a real expectation of what you're about to do, I think, is important. So based off of your training and your training runs and your tests, you need to have a good, like a realistic goal, right?
Yes.
Don't go out there and run 25 miles a week with a 20-mile long run and expect to go out there and qualify for the Boston Marathon, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you are that fast, that's awesome. But, like, don't expect to go out there and get a 30-minute PR.
Yeah.
Right, with that kind of volume. So understand where are you at physically, where are you at, and adjust your goals based off of that so you can have the best experience overall. But then here's what's awesome. This is what I find. Like, there's always, nerves when you first start.
Yes.
Even when you're excited, even when you're a little... Like,
well, again, it's like being in that roller coaster chair. Like, you know, it's going to be a lot of fun. You're excited, but you're also kind of like
nervous. What's going to happen?
That nervous
I know
anticipation.
This is probably going to be uncomfortable at a certain point, right?
It's a little scary.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so the nerves can set in, right? And so you can, and those nerves, for depending on the person, can some people throw up before events,
derail them,
right? Some people like cry before events.
I cry.
Yep. Some people like think about like not doing the event, right? They're like, oh. Pull my hamstring.
I could go home right now.
Yeah, and I'd be just fine, but you wouldn't be.
No, you'd be mad at yourself.
But if you remind yourself, you know what, as soon as I start the race, this is going to go away, right? I'm going to relax. I'm going to feel better. And especially if it's something long like the half or the full, you have a lot of time, right? And so in those moments in the very beginning, once the gun goes off, you're going to take off. And what I usually find happens is it's almost like if you remember your training, you will survive. right?
Very Yoda. Yeah.
So you'll get in there and it'll seem like second nature.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, it's what you do all the time.
Yeah, and say it should be nothing new than your training plan and everything you've done leading up to that moment.
Exactly, right? So the first part of the race, I feel like, is probably once you start, right? Before the race can be maybe some challenging moments of like nerves or what have you. But if you're doing your drills, right? If you're doing if you already have a pre-race routine, which you've developed, right? And that's one of the things that I think is really good about our group is we always try to help people learn consistencies, and those consistencies can really help you with those pre-race nerves, right?
Yeah.
So doing your little warm-up, doing your drills and your stretches, and having that same routine over and over and over again, it'll help you relax, because you're like, you know what, this is just another run.
Yeah.
Right? Once you start the event, then I feel like usually the first part of the race is pretty emotionally and mentally, I think it's pretty easy.
I think it is up until a certain point. I think especially if we're talking specifically like the Chevron and Aramco, a lot happening.
There is.
For like the first 8 miles. There's so much happening. So you kind of almost forget what you're doing. You're just like taking it all in. The people are cheering for you. The bands are out.
Yeah, if you think about it,
it's just fun.
If you've done this event before, you don't usually even, if you look back at the race, you don't usually even remember those parts of the race, right? Like the first part, probably the first third to maybe even that first half of the race.
Yeah.
Like it goes by so quickly,
It does.
and it's like a blur, right? It's usually going to be that middle to the last third
Where it starts to hurt a little bit.
where it's hurting, which is where you remember like all the stuff, right? So usually that's usually a place you can kind of coast, you can settle into your rhythm, and you can focus, right? And so one of the things I always try to encourage people to do is in those early parts of the race, don't focus necessarily on, you know what, I'm at mile 3, I got 10 more miles to go, right? Don't focus on, I'm at mile 5. Oh my God, I got 21.2 miles.
Don't do the countdown.
Don't do the countdown, right? Don't do that, right? The miles are going to file down. The miles are going to come. Focus on kind of the tasks at hand, right? And so one of the things I mentioned about like the start of the race, one of the things to kind of relax you and bring some of those anxieties down is to have a pre-race routine.
Yep.
Well, for me, one of the things I find to be extremely helpful is as part of my race plan, right? Every 30 minutes, I take in nutrition, right? Every 2 miles at this particular event, there's an aid station, right? So for me, I make sure that I hit the aid stations. I hit every aid station. Even if I'm just getting a sip of water, I hit every aid station, right? Now, I'm not stopping. I'm running.
You're just running, grabbing, and
pinching and going, right? But I'm hitting every aid station, right? So that's every 2 miles. Every 30 minutes, I'm going to be taking in some sort of nutrition, right? So those are 2 jobs I give myself to focus on, right? So I'm not worried necessarily about mile 10. I'm worried about get that aid station. I need to get in position for the aid station. I need to make sure, I'm not going to fall over anybody or trip anybody up as I'm crossing over. When I'm like, okay, it's time for me to take my nutrition. So they're jobs. For my pace, I'm constantly checking my pace, right? And kind of as we talked about last week as well, if you're familiar with the course, right? If you familiarize yourself with the course, well, there's markers, and then okay, all right, I've knocked off the first half of the marathon.
You know what to expect.
Right. You know the expectation. So I think for me anyway, having those jobs, those little jobs that you can, almost like a checklist, a checklist that you can knock off as you're going through the event, help a lot, like relax your any stressors or anxieties you might have, specifically in the beginning part of the race.
Well, and I think it also does help the time fly by.
Yes.
It really does. Like it helps, like before you know it, once you've gone through those tasks, you've gone like through your mental checks, you'll look up and you'll be at mile 8 and you'll be like, oh, okay, that wasn't bad. Like you said, you don't really remember the easy stuff at the beginning because you're just staying focused,
right?
Not getting spicy, not, worrying about racing whoever's next to you. No one cares.
Yep.
Just sticking to whatever your guns are.
Right. And if you're focused on so you got to remember, before you can run 13.1 miles, you got to run 1.
Yeah.
Right. And before you can get a PR of averaging a 9:07 pace to break sub 2 or sub 4, well, you got to run 1 mile at 9:07. Right. And so keeping that consistency of your pacing, I think really can help you. Right. So if you're focusing on these different jobs, one thing I think helps me, as well is especially for this particular course, there's tons of people out there.
So many people.
Right. And they're cheering you on. They've got signs out there. So there's always funny signs. Right. You've got freaking musicians out there. You got dancers and cheerleaders going on all over the place, right? So finding those fun things like that, I usually help you take kind of your mind off of the situation as well, right?
Agree.
And so I think that first part leading up to is probably going to be the easiest position you're going to have. if you're in the half, somewhere around mile 8 to 10 is where it's probably going to start feeling really uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right. And so when you get to those uncomfortable moments, I think that's when you have to like really focus in. And that's when you're going to start having the doubts.
Yep.
Right. That's when you're going to have to start, probably like in some of those harder training sessions, you're going to start negotiating with yourself.
Yeah. I could slow down.
Right. You're like, okay,
if I don't hit the PR, it's not the end of the world. I
There
can always
you
do
go.
it next year. That's the biggest one. You always try to give yourself an out for like, if I don't hit the PR, I guess I got to sign up for another one.
yeah.
Instead of just like buckling up, like I can do this. I just got to stick to my guns.
So when you did your, we'll say the high rocks you just did, did you have a goal in mind or anything?
No,
or were you just
honestly,
going to finish it?
it was just to finish in one piece.
Okay. What about the half? I mean, the full that you did.
The full, it was my first time doing a full, and I did have a goal, and it was and now that I look back at being my first marathon, it was a big goal.
Okay. I assume it was a sub 4.
It was like right at 4. For someone who had never done a marathon, I'm like, yeah, I could do 4. Yeah, I could probably hit 4.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily a
For where
impossible
I
goal.
was
Yeah.
in my fitness.
So,
it was
so
a
at
reach.
what point do you feel like, so did you negotiate with yourself and be like, and say, I don't have to do 4?
Not until, honestly, I felt great and I didn't negotiate with myself until way later in the game.
So what's way later in the game?
I would
When?
say probably on a 26, I would say it was probably like, I mean, I guess for a marathon, it was probably about right. It was about like 16
Okay.
when I made the mistake, like, oh, I have to use the restroom. Because I was like just in a groove and I was going, and then I made the mistake of stopping to use the restroom. And as soon as I stopped for long enough, my body all caught up with me and I was like, oh no, this is uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
And that's when it started like kind of hitting me. And I was like, okay, well, if I don't hit 4, then we'll hit 4:15. And then I realized I wasn't going to hit 4:15. I'm like, we're just going to finish.
Okay.
We're just going to do what we can.
Yeah. And that's what I find is is funny, right?
Yeah.
Is because when you start negotiating with yourself, you start giving yourself permission to not do this, and that you're like, okay, you know what? I'll accept this.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that I always encourage is to set an A, B, and C goal.
Yes.
Right. Before you even start. Right. And depending on how your training went or whatever, I always say your A goals, if, excuse me, I always say if everything is perfect, your training went well, your rest and taper went perfect, the weather is great,
Yep.
that's your A goal, right? That's your ultimate goal.
Yep. Everything's in your favor.
Your C goal is like bare minimums,
Yeah.
right? No matter what, if the wheels fall off, this is what I'm hitting. This is what I can do, right? And your B goal usually falls somewhere in between
Yeah.
those two, right? I think that really helps because that only gives you 3 options, right? You're not giving yourself permission to go from a 4 to a 4:20 or 4:15 or
Yeah.
whatever, right? You're saying, okay, this is my A goal, this is my B goal, my C goal. So worst case scenario,
Yeah.
if you give yourself an out, you're only giving yourself an out for your C goal.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a good place to start. But then also in that, I think those are the moments where when it starts to get uncomfortable and when you start negotiating with yourself, you have to remind yourself what the goal was and why you set that goal in the beginning. Right. You've got to try to remember your why.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I find is it's a lot like this in life too, is that kind of as a society or culture, we're more skewed toward the negative, right? It's very easy for us to see everything wrong
Yep.
and all the things to stress out about and all the things to worry about. And I feel like sometimes it can be a little more challenging for us to look at the good
Yeah.
and the positives, right? Perfect example. If I tell you right now, if I go down a list and I say, okay, Lauren, here's what I think is wrong with you. Bam, 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 bam. You're probably going to sit there and it's going to hurt your feelings, but you're going to be like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if I flip
You're
that
right.
on you and I say, all right, Lauren, this is what's amazing about you. And I go, bam, 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 bam. You're going to be like, no, well, you're going to be all embarrassed. You're not going to necessarily, you may not agree. You're like,
I don't take the compliment well.
most of us don't.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's on the positive side of that. So it's really easy for us to see the negative, oftentimes hard for us to see the positive. So I think practicing a routine of focusing on the positive, focusing on the good, focusing on, okay, this is what I did well in training. Let me hold on to that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I remember 6 weeks ago when I was doing my threshold effort, I remember I had the same thoughts. I was going to give myself an out. Right. I didn't do it then. Let me just hold on a little bit longer, right? You guys have heard me say this quote before, but there was an ultra runner that I was reading one of his books, and they were asking him the question. They were like, "How do you run these ultras? How do you run these 100-mile, 250-mile races? How do you go and do, a stinking Death Valley race, right? When it's 190 degrees outside or whatever, and you're running for 48 hours straight. He's like, well, I don't go in to run 250 miles, right? I'm not running 250 miles, right? What I'm doing is there are certain points in the race where like your whole body hurts, right? Your nose hurts, the tip of your nose hurts, your ear hurts, right?
Yeah.
You're in pain, right?
Yeah.
And so what I just tell myself is take one more step.
Yep.
Just take one more step. And before I know it, I've finished 250 miles, right?
Yeah.
So I think in those moments, a lot of that is fleeting, right? As far as like how you feel and your emotions and your like the mental state. And so if you can just say, okay, listen, I'm hurting right now. Okay. I'm at mile 10. Okay. I just need to make it to mile 11. If I can make it to mile 11 and I can maintain this pace, then you know what? Then I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
So you give yourself like, okay, here's my goal. I'm not trying to make it to mile 13. I'm just trying to make it to mile 11.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you make it to mile 11, usually be somewhere in there, you may feel completely different.
Yeah.
Your body may feel good. You may see somebody you know,
Yeah.
and that gives you some kind of like boost.
Yeah.
Right. You may see somebody that passed you a moment ago, and you're catching up to them, and that may give you a boost, right?
Yeah.
So you never know what might happen. So giving yourself little bitty, like we'll call them goals, micro goals within the event can really help you take that next step, so that you can take the next step, and take the next step, so that you can really truly finish.
Yeah, I think that those those little boosts that like you just mentioned, because I think everyone does tend to get those at some point in the marathon, or at least I did. I know when you go through the first round of hurt and I don't want to do this isn't fun anymore, and then you get like that little serotonin boost where you get like, I guess, the runner's high, and you suddenly feel like great again. That's like my favorite part of like an event or race, because I feel like that's like just that's like I overcame that like little hump. I can do this, and you get like that whole big new boost of like, I got this, I can do it, I can push further. That's like my favorite part of the race.
But usually that probably won't happen until after you hurt.
Yeah, you got to hurt first. You got to get through the hurt.
Right, you've got to get through the hurt. You've got to hit through the wall, right? And there may be multiple walls, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Like for the Houston Marathon, when you get to around mile 12 or 13, it's kind of like not as many people there. You're kind of getting by 59 or so and 6:10, and you're making your way to the bridge, right? The bridge is right before you hit mile 13. And a lot of people, that can be a tough time, right? Because the fatigue may be setting in a little bit, right? You're in it now.
Yep.
You're in it. You've been running for an hour, 2 hours, depending on how fast you're running, right? So you're in it.
Yeah.
Right? Some people 3 hours, right? 2.5 hours. So you're in the thick of it, right? Into the thick of it. And so you get to that thing, and all of a sudden this daunting mountain comes in front of you. And it's really not a mountain, right? But it feels like it.
It's a highway mountain.
Yeah. So you climb this thing, right? And I can see right then and there, you're like, I'm not going to be able to do this. How am I going to finish this?
Yeah.
Right? And so remembering, hey, you know what? I've been running. And so this is one of the things I try to help people do is like, and especially in the easy pace running, if you go out and run your easy pace, which is usually much, much slower than your race pace, and let's say you do an 18 or 20 mile run.
Yep.
More than likely, you've ran up to the time that you're planning on running for that race, right? That's kind of what ends up matching up to, right?
Yeah.
Your easy pace time ends up matching your goal time for your event. So at that point in time, you got more left in the tank.
Yeah.
You definitely have more left in the tank.
Yeah.
And so don't start doubting yourself. Tell yourself, I'm a big, not a mantra person, but I'm a big person of like speaking to yourself and telling yourself you can do this.
Yeah.
You can do this. Don't tell yourself you can't do it. Remind yourself you've been doing it. And if you did it before, you can do it again.
I'll do it again.
Right. And this is just going to be another one of those opportunities where you overcame. And then when you get through that, then you can benefit from, the serotonin boost and the runner's high and that great feeling. Right. But then there's going to be a point. It's going to happen every race. I don't care. If you're giving your best, there's going to be a point where you hit the quote unquote wall, right?
The hurt.
I remember my first marathon, like when I was training for it, like, I was studying everything I could. I was reading books. I was doing YouTube channels. I was doing everything I could to prepare myself. And they kept talking about the wall, right? You're going to hit the wall. And I don't know why, but I always pictured like a physical wall, like an actual, like,
It's just going to pop up.
like literally, I'm going to literally hit, there's going to be something. And at a certain point, I'm just not going to be able to go any further.
Yep.
Right. And you've got to push through the wall.
Yep.
Right. And I watched documentaries. There was one documentary I watched. It was like Marathoners 365 or something like that. It was on Amazon, and it was like a marathon in Italy or something. And they were talking to all these people that were running marathons, and these people seemed like such experts to me. They seemed like they really knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
They seemed like, I mean, they'd done tons of marathons, like, you know, oh, this is my 15th marathon or whatever. I'm trying to break a PR. I'm trying to do this, right? And they were talking about, you know, all these different things. And a lot of it didn't like resonate with me because I wasn't familiar with all this stuff, right? I barely had found out that a marathon was 26.2 miles, right? And so like as they're talking, they're carbo loading, right? The night before they're eating the pasta and they're eating all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I got to make sure I do my pasta and all this other stuff, right? And so
Do it like the real Italians.
yeah, the pasta. And so, you know, they're running this thing and, you know, I think you know how documentaries are, they'll focus on like 4 or 5 people and they'll follow them through the whole thing. And so they had people from different levels and stuff. And, you know, seeing these people finish these races and like how they were struggling and half of them were like limping and grabbing their hamstrings and, you know.
Bleeding at the nipples.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bloody nipples.
Bloody
or whatever,
nipples.
Right. I was like, this is what marathon racing is? Oh, my God. And they were talking about the wall. They kept talking about the wall. And so in my training, I tried to do everything I could to prepare myself for the wall.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, okay, the wall's not going to affect me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hit the wall. There is no wall. Right. There is no wall. It's like the Matrix.
I'm
There is
bigger
no
than the
spoon,
wall.
Right.
There's no spoon.
Yeah. So, like, I remember running my very first marathon, and I wasn't really sure of what pace I should run. I wasn't, like, 100% sure. I knew that I wanted to be under 4 hours, but then after I ran, like, all my runs, I knew that wasn't a challenging goal.
Okay.
Right. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can be like 3:30-ish or so. Right.
Okay.
That's a good challenging goal for me. Right. So I mean, I knew what that number was that I needed to run a 7:30 or 3:30. And I took off and I ended up starting, I think, at a 7:20 pace or something like that. Right. And I felt so good. And it felt so easy.
At the beginning?
At the beginning.
Of
Like,
course.
seriously, it was so easy, right? And so I'm running this pace, and I had a couple guys that I knew with me running, like, and one of them was running the half, one was running the full, so all 3 of us were staying together for at least 8 to 9 miles, right? Then we split off, right? And then it was just 2 of us.
Okay.
We're running through, and we're like talking. It's easy peasy. Like, it was like nothing, right? Then somewhere around mile 14, I lost my buddy. Like, he just disappeared. Like, I don't know where he went.
The wall got him?
He just disappeared, right?
Okay.
I was like, yeah, I guess.
The wall got him.
Yeah. So I was like, where'd you go? Where'd he go? And I was looking around, and I don't even know how. I honestly don't remember, like, him fading away. Like, I just remember we were next to each other.
And then he just wasn't.
And then he just was gone. He, like, spontaneously combusted, right? So
Just dissolved into the air.
So for the next, like, 4 miles, I still felt good. I was crushing it. I was
Okay.
feeling easy, right?
And this was at what mileage?
Huh?
This was at what mile in the race?
When I lost the person,
Yeah.
14,
Okay.
I think, right? So then I'm running, right? I get to right where Memorial Drive is, and I'm still feeling good, but I had to use the bathroom so bad.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
I had to use the bathroom, and I needed to take my gel, and my hands were so cold, I couldn't unzip my zipper thingy, right? So this is where I stopped. I was like, all right, there's a bathroom. There's someone that has hands. I'm going to ask this lady to unzip my pants for me. So I stop, and I frantically, I talk to this lady the way you act all the time. You know how you come into the gym? Like,
all frantic?
frazzled?
Yes.
I was like, I came up, can you unzip my pants? Can you unzip
Like
my- I can't
everything's
get
an
my gel.
emergency?
My hands can't work. And so she's like, unzip your pants. I was like, yeah, I need to get my gel. And
She's like reaching for her like pepper
yeah.
spray in
And
her
so
pocket.
she's like, oh yeah, I got you. So she reached down and she literally put her hands on my butt to like steady my cheek and then unzip my britches, right?
She
and
saw
then
an
pulled my gel out
opportunity.
for me, right? And so then I ran over to the bathroom real quick, used the porta potty, and then took off, right? And I settled right back into my pace, and this is right at mile 20.
Okay.
From mile 20 to 21, I was running a 7:30 pace.
Okay.
Okay. I was supposed to be running a 7:45 pace the whole race.
Okay.
But I was like 7:25 pretty much the entirety of the event.
Okay.
I get to mile 20 and I hit 7:30 at mile 21. And then something happened. I can't even tell you what it was.
Wheels fell off?
Like there was a wall, a literal wall. Like I didn't cramp. I just couldn't go any faster. My legs would literally not move any faster. And I went from 7:30 to 7:55 to 8:30 to 9:30 to 10:45
Oh, geez.
to 11:30.
Oh, you were almost walking.
No, I was jogging. I was running. There was no walking. I never stopped, right? And I never cramped, but my legs, my body hurt so much and they were so tired. I was so fatigued. I remember coming down underneath 45 and making like a little S curve to make that last straightaway.
Yep.
And people are just flying past me. I'm talking like these people were like freaking The Flash or Sonic the Hedgehog. Like they are flying. And I'm like, did these people run the same race I ran? How are they running so fast? I mean, these people are like sprinting. And I'm just like, with everything I have to just put one leg in front of the other. And I remember I got to the 1/4 mile mark and I could see the finish line. And I saw a couple of friends of mine that I knew and they're cheering, yelling my name. And I was so embarrassed because I felt like I was just shuffling my feet, right? And then I don't even know why, because I'm a firm believer in not looking behind you. But like I was maybe 100 meters away from the finish line, and I looked behind me because all these people probably were passing me.
Some of your friends
and I saw this girl that I had passed at mile 13.
Oh.
And we kind of talked a little bit, and she was coming, and she was running fast. And I was like, she's not passing me. I can't let anybody else pass me. So I started trying to like sprint, right? I have this video of me doing that. And in my mind, I was sprinting with perfection form. So fast. I was doing like a 4:30 mile.
Oh, that's the worst. Like when it's in your head versus reality.
But I watched the video.
So bad.
And literally I was just shuffling my feet and like barely moving my body.
And she's like just closing the gap.
But she didn't beat me.
Oh, really?
I made it. Like literally I passed the line right before she did. Right. So I beat her. Right. But there was a literal wall. Right. So there in every event, and ever since then, like as I've raced, the more I've done, even in all the great training that I've done, like when I've had great training blocks, there's always a place where it hurts so bad that you want to stop.
Yep.
Right. There's always a place where you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
Right? And so that to me is what the wall really is.
Yeah.
And so for me, when it comes to the wall, this is what I have, and this is what I encourage a lot of my athletes to do is don't focus on how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Don't focus on the pace and don't pay attention to where you're at.
Yeah.
Work on your form.
Yeah.
Just focus on your form, right? Focus on the things that you can not maybe necessarily control, but the things you can work on.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, maybe I can't hit my pace, but what I can do is I can work on trying to stay efficient. I can work on my form. Drive your knees, pick up your heels, quicken your cadence, and repeat that to yourself. All right, come on, James, drive your knees, pick up your heels, quicken your cadence. Come on, James, drive your knees, pick up your heels, quicken your cadence. You got this. And what I have found is very fascinating is when you do that, because you've probably done that so much and you've ran those paces so often, your body almost settles right back into the right pace.
Yeah.
Right? You get back up to your form and you look down and you're running the pace. You don't hurt any less, but you're actually able to keep the pace.
Yeah.
And then something happens. You're a mile away from the finish line.
Yep.
And you get this new rush of energy. You get this new rush of adrenaline. You see your crew, and your crew's like, I'm going to run with you for a little bit, right? And then all of a sudden, like this rush of adrenaline comes, and you're like, I got this.
You almost get like angry.
Yeah,
I get it. I get like that inner like anger rage. It's not like rage, but it's just this like little like, I got this.
You know what it reminds me of? There's a little girl, the same little girl that mentioned the camel toes. When she gets this little look on her face of sheer determination when she wants to do something. And we were doing, whatever the movement was, and I could see her, and she's like squinting her nose and she's moving her arm, and it's just like this look of sheer raw determination. Yeah. Right. And then she gets to whatever she's going to do, and it's a little uneventful. Right. That's what I picture what you just said.
I was going to say, have you and your daughter watched Bolt?
Yes.
Okay, with the hamster and the ball.
Yes.
There's a scene, and I always think of this scene, where the hamster is like making this big like declaration. He's like evil laughing, and he's like got this like and it's like this really big moment for him. Yeah. But on the outside looking in, it's just a little hamster squeaking like crazy. And like that's what I feel like.
I agree with that. That is a great illumination.
I am just the hamster and the ball squeaking my little brain out.
Yeah, but in your mind, it's like
in my mind, I am the Hulk.
Yes, I love it. So if you're the Hulk inside, let it happen.
Let it happen. Rage out.
Hulk smash.
This PR.
Right.
I like
so, but focus on your form. Focus on those jobs, right? And this too shall pass, right? That feeling's going to pass. You'll settle back in, and then, like I said, as you get deeper into the race, I really feel like in a marathon, if you can make it to mile 23 or 24, you're finishing that race.
Yep.
Right. And you're probably going to be able to push a little bit at the end. Even if you're hurting, you'll be able to pick it up a little bit.
You'll get a little like pick up from everybody around you.
Right.
It's a party on the last like mile.
In the half marathon, if you can make it to mile 12 or 11, if you can make it to mile 11, you're going to not only finish, but you can push more,
Yes.
right? Those last couple miles.
Yeah.
And so it's really just it's that like between 8 and 10 on the half and between 20 and 23, 24 on the full marathon. Those are going to be the hardest parts, right? And if you can just work your way through those, right? If you can talk yourself, and I'm serious when I say, I honestly don't think, and I say this to you sometimes, right? I was like, if you don't like yourself, nobody else will either, right? I've said that before, right? But also, if you can't talk yourself up, it doesn't matter what other people say.
Yeah.
You're not going to get motivated by other people's stuff, right? You have to be able to encourage yourself. You have to be able to,
It's true.
kind of rah yourself. And if you can do that, then when you do see those other people, it'll mean so much more.
Yes.
It'll mean so much more, right? You may cry.
That's okay.
You're probably definitely going to cry.
I
right?
always cry.
But that's okay.
That's fine.
That's okay. Whatever you need to get through it, right? Feel the emotions, but use those. And so maybe what you've noticed is in all this stuff that we've talked about, like to get past those mental aspects, to get past those challenges is instead of focusing on the mental challenges, give yourself very physical and tangible things to work on. And what I feel like it does, it helps take your mind off of that.
Yeah.
Right. Off of the struggle, off of the challenge, and onto the task at hand.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, you want to stay mindful of the moment and not get too separated by focusing on what's to come.
Yes.
Focus on just taking that next step. Focus on
Yes.
hitting that next mile. Focus on getting to that next aid station. Focus on the form. Focus on your efficiency and focus on all the things you've done up to this point to truly prepare you for that moment.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what training is for.
Yeah.
It's to prepare you for the moment.
Put you in those situations so it's not a surprise. So scenario, I'm going to give you a scenario and you tell me how you would coach somebody through this scenario. You have an athlete out there. They're starting to hit the pain cave and let's say they hit the wall. And for them, the wall is massive cramp, literally like cramp that's like debilitating, like can't walk, like seizing up at the hamstring. How do you walk them through that process?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a mental aspect to that because then I think sometimes it's easy to just say, you know what, I just got to quit, right? Because I'm not going to make it, right? And you almost kind of like get to the point where you just want to, you give up.
Yeah.
Right. And so like for me, this is one of the things I feel like really helped me when I was doing my training for my first marathon. I was following this guy on YouTube, and he made an observation or a suggestion. He said, okay, as you do these long runs, especially if you're training for your first marathon, every long run is the longest run you've ever had.
Okay.
So every week you're getting a new territory. So your body's feeling something it's never felt before, right? And so there might be times where you start to cramp up, or there might be times where like your form falls apart, and so your muscle groups will start shutting down, stuff like that. He's like, when that happens, my suggestion is stop and go through your warm-up protocols again.
Okay.
Do your drills, do your A skips, do your butt kicks, right? And what you're doing is basically, and you might have to do them a little slower, especially if you're cramping, right? But what you're doing is you're increasing blood circulation to those muscle groups, right? And we know this, blood is life, right? Oxygen is life. It creates energy. And so oftentimes when your body is cramping, usually what that is, a lot of people think that it's because you're dehydrated, or you need electrolytes, or you need pickle juice or sodium or something like that. And all those things, electrolytes, so magnesium, potassium, calcium, sodium, all those things, water, they help with proper muscle function. So they help your muscles function properly, okay? So yes, if you get dehydrated, then your muscles are more likely to not function properly and cramp up, right? Yeah. But most of the time, what cramps really are is your body has kind of reached a place of fatigue.
Yeah.
Right? You've hit your limit.
Yep.
Okay? And so as you begin to hit that limit, your form usually falls apart and you start overusing certain muscle groups and other muscle groups start shutting down. So if you can kind of just take a moment, stop, and do some drills, get that blood circulating again, fire those muscle groups up again, then what tends to happen is the cramping can stop and you can settle back in and start running again.
Yeah.
Right. So you see people trying to stretch, and that can help as well a little bit. But what I found is active stretching is usually probably going to be a little bit better, getting that blood flow, and kind of getting your body and your brain remembering, okay, this is how I should be running. This is how I should be moving. But no matter what, keep moving forward.
Even if you have to walk.
Even if you got to walk.
Yeah.
Right. If you got to like hobble.
Yeah.
Keep moving forward. Don't go back. Don't sit down. Don't stop. Now, I mean, there's been moments in races where I've cramped up and like I couldn't move forward.
Yeah.
Right. And I had to just stop and like shake it out, wiggle it out, stretch it out.
Yeah.
Do whatever so that I could get that under control. And usually what will happen is that like after a certain amount of time, if you get that blood flowing again, that circulation, usually you can work through it.
So let's go past maybe the race, the mentality after the race, and it's somebody who did not hit their goal. Let's say they didn't hit their A, they didn't hit their B, maybe they hit their C, or maybe worse, they didn't hit their C even, and they're really beating themselves up about it. And they're like really crestfallen. They're not sure if they like want to like give up on the whole endeavor. How would you mentally coach them through those feelings afterwards? Because you've had to do that with me a few times.
Well, the first thing I would say is you have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, did you prepare properly for the event? Right? In my opinion, if you prepare properly for whatever the goal is you have, you're going to hit your goal. Right? And the only way you didn't is if like something happened, the weather was crazy, or you went out, you didn't stick to your race plan or something dumb like that. Right? And if that's the case, well, then next time stick to your race plan and you'll do just fine. Right? But usually probably what happened is you just probably didn't prepare properly. Right? And if that's the case, just be honest with yourself. We'll say, okay, this is what I did this time to hit my goal. It's still a good goal. What do I have to do next time to hit my goal? Right? So in other words, just maybe give yourself a little kick in the butt, right? And say, you know what? This is not a failure, right? This is not like the end of the world. There can always be another race as long as, the sun shines tomorrow. There's another opportunity. And so this can be a motivator for me to remember, okay. And that's honestly been for me, what has helped me throughout, the years is like, I usually get better after a failure. Yeah. Right. So when I feel like I've failed in an event, that is usually when I use that as like, we call it like, poster board motivation, right? Is where I like remind myself, okay, I don't want to feel like that again in a race. Yeah. Right. I don't want to fail like that again in a race. And so that's what I use as my motivator throughout my training blocks, throughout my thing, and say, okay, this is what I'm going to change so that I can be better at this. Right. And so I use it to fuel my next training block. I use it to fuel my next race so that I don't get to the starting line unprepared again. Right. And so that's what I would encourage people is like, you know what? Don't beat yourself up. You're going to, but don't beat yourself up, right? Don't wallow in self-pity. But in other words, just be honest with yourself. This is where I lacked. This is where I struggled. This is where I didn't do what I was supposed to do. You know what? I'm doubling down. And this time around, I'm going to do the right things the right way, right? And so a lot of people can be tempted when that happens is to get that motivation, but then now they're like, okay, I got to go harder.
I was just going to say, most people think I got to go real hard all the time. I got to be going
And what I'm
David
saying
Goggins
is
intense.
Actually do the things that you should have done before.
Yeah.
Right? So get in the volume, get in the easy aerobic efforts, build that aerobic engine. Yes, do the hard efforts, but really, and that's what I mean by be honest with yourself and look at it, right? Did you
only do hard efforts?
Did you only do hard efforts leading up to this race?
Yeah.
Did you do what did we say you needed to run before this race? Did you need to do 17 miles a week or did you need to do 30 miles a week, right? Did you do, like, if you do it 17 miles a week, how much of that was hard? Was it 6 miles of that was hard? So more than half of it was hard, plus you did a long run, so that means you only ran 3 times a week, right? So if you're able to be honest with yourself, right, and say, yeah, you worked hard, but you only really worked hard on the 3 hard days you worked, right? Well, you didn't put in the effort you needed to. So maybe next time don't work so hard.
Yep.
Do more volume, relax, enjoy the journey, right? And you probably will be extremely surprised that you'll enjoy the training more because you're going to get more wins.
Yep.
And I think, honestly, that's what training is. training should build your confidence because you keep getting wins.
Yeah.
You're going to get failures, especially in the beginning. You're going to get losses. But what ends up happening is eventually you get more wins than losses.
Yep.
And each time you do a speed effort, every time you go do a long run and you finish your fast pace, your confidence is built. And then finally you get to the race day and you're like, you know what? I know I'm going to do great.
Yeah.
Because I've done everything I needed to do up to this point to be successful.
Yep.
So, give yourself some grace. Don't be too hard on yourself, but let it be a wake-up call to say, okay, this is how I'm going to do better as I move forward.
All right.
All right. So I hope you guys are getting out there this weekend, having a good time. It's going to be a fun weekend. There's going to be a ton of us out there. We'll be out there. So if you see us, shout out to us, say hello. If you pass me during the half marathon,
Give James some encouragement.
don't talk about my shoes. Just tell me I'm doing a good job, right? Don't tell me that the shoes are wearing me. You just tell me how good a job I'm doing if you pass me, okay? Because I'll be honest with you. If I see you and I recognize you and I pass you, I'm going to tell you how good a job you're doing.
I thought you were going to say, I'm going to tell you about your shoes.
No, I ain't going to talk about your shoes. I'm going to be like, you're doing great. Keep going. We're almost there.
Yep.
That's how I'll do it. So don't make me feel bad.
Don't make James feel bad.
Yeah, because I'm going to feel bad enough if you're passing me.
Don't tell people they're almost there if they're not at least by mile 15 in the marathon. That always upsets me.
Oh, no, you should do it. I love
No,
it.
every time I see a sign that says you're almost there and you're standing at mile 3, I get so mad. I'm like,
I love it. Well,
Get
that's
outta
the
here.
joke.
I know, but it's
the
still
joke.
upsetting.
That's the joke.
It's very upsetting.
That's the joke. So, but get out there, have a great time, guys. Yep. Enjoy the experience. It's a great weekend. It's a great race. You put in the training. I don't do the whole good luck thing, right? Because I don't believe that it's the luck of the draw for something like this. I believe if you put in the effort, you're going to get a great result out, right?
Facts.
So I'm going to tell you, go out, do your best.
Mm-hmm. Don't go out hot.
Don't go out too hot. Try to enjoy yourself. Smile as much as you can, right? Especially you ladies out there.
Smile.
You like that?
I like how I started to agree with you and then you finished it and I was already committed to the agreement. That's a trick.
So everybody out there, smile as much as you can
Smile.
because it takes less energy to smile than it does to frown, okay?
Makes you feel better.
Plus, you may not see the person taking the pictures and you don't want to get that.
You don't want that. You don't want the gremlin race photo.
Yeah,
We don't like the gremlin
You
race
don't want
photo.
an ugly race photo, right? You want a smiling race photo, right? Look like you're enjoying it even though you're hurting. Look for your friends because I guarantee they're going to be out. Especially if you're part of our crew, we're going to be out there and we're going to be supporting you and we're going to be cheering you on. So we appreciate all you guys do. We want to know those success stories. So hit us up. Let us know, how your training went. Let us know how your race is going. Let us know what your goals are. We want to know if you PR'd. So tell us if anything maybe we've helped you with as you're getting ready for this race. If we've helped you with it, let us know. We love hearing about those stories. And so you can send those to me at james@mybcfit.com. You can also go to our Instagram page at Running with James. You could DM us, let us know there. If you haven't done so, make sure you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, share, do all that great stuff. Lauren is shaking her head. I know you can't hear her shaking her head, but she is shaking her head. Yes.
Very excitedly shaking my head.
Yep.
In agreement.
And if you have the ability to, also you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Running with James. We get extras like extra episodes, possibilities to get swag, cool things. And then also you get more of us. More of us. So we appreciate you guys every time you come in. We hope you have an amazing race and an amazing year.
Y'all got this.
Remember, if you change your mind,
You can change your life.
peace.
Bye.
Change your mind, change your life.